is Wednesday, my dudes.
Welcome to another episode of Wednesday Toast, a podcast about comic book stuff where we talk about all kinds of comic book related stuff. My name is Lex, also known as Wednesday Pool, and I am your solo host today. On this week's episode, we are going to talk a little bit about Ironheart, seeing as the last 3 episodes recently released. Will contain spoilers for the entire series. I'm not going to go into like crazy depth, but there are a few things that will be mentioned. So if you haven't seen it, you should probably steer clear until you watched it, then definitely come back. So as I mentioned, the final 3 episodes dropped July 1st for Ironheart. Ironheart follows Riri Williams, played by the incredibly talented Dominique Thorne. We first met Dominique Thorne as Riri in Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and now she's back in Chicago building her own advanced armor suit. Her journey in Chicago leads her to be in cahoots with Parker Robbins, aka The Hood, played by the wildly talented Anthony Ramos, which sets up this seemingly tech versus magic conflicts. More on that in a little bit. But I was intrigued, a little indifferent when it comes to like most Marvel series. They're all pretty good. They're all fine in my opinion. I don't have any like strong feelings for or against them. So this did catch my eye though. I do like the whole magic versus tech angle. I think that's honestly my sweet spot and why I, spoiler alert, enjoyed this show, right? The shows and movies that I tend to go in with the least expectations end up surprising me, and I enjoy them more times than not. And Ironheart was definitely one of those cases. It felt like a fresh take, in my opinion, for the MCU, right? It had the the vibe of Chicago. It had the heist. It had some cosmic magical elements, tech. And a lot of that stuff really stood out for me. Some of my general interest, especially when it comes to comic books. Thorne as Riri really grew on me as well. I wasn't a huge fan of her in Wakanda Forever. It felt very random to have her in that movie. But in the solo series, we really got to know her a little bit more, and I really enjoyed that. She was great. I mean, I really think she carried the show, and her character interactions with some of these lesser known characters was some of my favorite parts of the series. I also enjoyed having a Marvel story that wasn't necessarily constrained to the big connected universe, right? It is connected, and there are things that will set up threads for future projects, but I really appreciated it just kind of being its own thing. And it had its own narrative, its own smaller characters. Episode 1, Take Me Home, it grounded Riri in Chicago, set up the initial conflict with Parker Robbins, and established some of those core motivations. Episode 2 was Will the Real Natalie Please Stand Up? And it sort of deepened Riri's personal journey through this new AI Natalie, and then set up this sort of pretty interesting dynamic with Joe McGillicuddy, which, spoiler alert, we learn is Obadiah Stane's son. So that was pretty cool. I really enjoyed that actor. I'm blanking on his name, but he was really good. Episode 3, we in danger, girl. Tone shifts a little bit, right? Riri starts to question her choices, and I know a lot of people, the naysayers out there, have opinions about her choices in this series. But then we have the big reveal of Zeke Stane, and that's another twist that sort of connects her to Tony Stark, which I thought was cool. And episode 4, Bad Magic. This is where Riri sort of pivoted towards magic, right? She was trying to figure out how the hood worked, and she goes and finds out some connections she has to her mother, and they sort of explore that. Episode 5, Karma's a Glitch, was really emotional. The story continues with the, magic aspect. Her suit gets destroyed. These are all spoilers. So her suit gets destroyed by Zeke, and then she builds a new one out of her stepdad's car that he left for her. And then they infuse it with magic, and Zelma, I believe her name is, lets her know like there's a mutual exchange with the, magic has a cost. And Riri, without even thinking, says, "Yeah, let's do it." No, whatever the cost is. And the cost ends up being sort of the deletion of Natalie, which was pretty heavy. It was pretty good. Episode 6 was the finale. It was The Past of the Past. Huge spoiler. Long anticipated, forever hinted at. Mephisto was in it. So that was a big one. His character was really, really good. I'm excited to see more of him. The Hood was great. Yeah, I was wishy-washy about him going into the show. And throughout the show, it just kind of grew on me, just like everyone else in this series. Then, the big climactic cliffhanger where you find out. Wait, I really thought that Riri didn't take the deal with Mephisto, and then you find out that she did. So I'm really interested to see where that goes. Overall, again, the character interactions were probably my favorite part. Anthony Ramos ended up being a really compelling villain, and the themes of like innovation, legacy, magic versus science, and sort of grief and finding like your place in the world. I think they were all handled really well, and they haven't gotten enough credit yet by the reactions that I've seen. So what's next for Ironheart? So I'm not really sure what's next for Ironheart, but I'm definitely invested in this character now. As a matter of fact, I'll be all in for the MCU, and I'll leave my indifference at the door if they dive into the supernatural stories after all of these multiversal shenanigans, right? My one, and I was thinking, I don't need it in a season two, right? Don't need it at all. But I think it would be really cool if we got AI Tony Stark, now that he's dipping his toe back into the MCU. I think it'd be cool, even if it's like 1 or 2 episodes, just to have sort of, I don't know, her interactions with him. I think would be really cool. And again, and actually, I think that would have been a huge part of season one. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to get this misconstrued, right? I don't think season one needed it. I think it would be a drastically different story than what we got. And I'm not saying that it needed AI Tony Stark instead of Natalie, right? This is all important to the story that we got. But I do think if and I don't think we should cater sort of those hateful weirdos on the internet, but I do think that they would probably just not be as vocal if there was some sort of Tony Stark reveal. Again, I don't think I needed it. I definitely don't need it. And I just think it would be cool to see him at some point interact with the character. So, and maybe we'll see something like that. Who knows? I have no idea what's next for Riri, but I am really excited. Now, we can't talk about Ironheart without talking about the absolutely pathetic review bombing campaign, right? And it's not just a handful of negative reviews, it's like very targeted sabotage. I don't think there's any other word for it. And it started before most people have even seen the show. You can just look at the numbers. Within hours of the first 3 episodes dropping on Disney Plus on June 24th, Ironheart's audience score on Rotten Tomatoes was down to 32%. That's crazy. 32% before the general public had access, right? The only people that were watching the show were press members whose reviews go into the critic score, not the audience score. So that's a clear indicator of review bombing. IMDb saw a similar situation, right? Their overall score was between 3.5 and 4.3 out of 10, which in my opinion is proof that there was something going on there. We saw around 2,000 one-star reviews, which is like insane right out at the gate. But on the flip side, I guess there were fans trying to counteract it. So there was 1,000 10-star reviews. I don't agree with this sort of review bombing on either side of it, even though the more negative ones are more prevalent. The extreme split is wild, and it doesn't help anyone. This is just silly. There needs to be a better way to moderate these things. And I don't have the answer for it, but it's kind of silly. When you take a look deeper in IMDb, a lot of the individual scores averaged about 5.3, which indicated that the overall show was being targeted instead of like individual episodes. So, I don't know, right? People wonder like, why would people review bomb this show? And besides like the obvious racism or sexism, right? I think these YouTubers, obviously they get rewarded for this behavior and they lean into it. And they think, and some people say, just don't pay attention to them, just ignore them, right? But there are a lot of easily impressionable moviegoers and fans of people that consume this sort of content that won't even give these things a chance because their favorite creator said something like that. I feel like every 8 out of 10 comments I hear about the MCU is just someone parroting that same old quote. The MCU hasn't been the same since Endgame. And I feel like review bombing and this sort of rhetoric that ties directly into that. I feel like it has a part of that. I really do. Now, this isn't new, obviously, for Marvel DC projects. We think about Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, She-Hulk, if you can see a pattern in this. You can even flip the other Disney projects like The Acolyte, the live action Little Mermaid, Snow White. I'm not saying these movies and shows are good or bad. I'm just saying that there's a similar theme when it comes to these certain creators, usually framed as the absolute worst word on the internet, woke, or they're like DEI. And these are just like a catch-all phrase for someone that has discomfort with, diverse representation. Usually, I know there are people that don't like these things. I get it. But dismissing these projects and refusing to watch it based on a lead even before it releases and then framing it as a review or reaction is just wild to me, right? It's like an ideological opposition more than a genuine critique of the show. Despite all that, Ironheart's audience score on Rotten Tomatoes did rebound a little bit. I think it ended up around 72% the last I saw it, which is good in my opinion, especially if you factor in getting review bombed straight out the gate, right? I don't think IMDb bounced back as well, but Ironheart ended up being the number one stream show on Disney Plus. I don't know if that means anything to anyone. I don't know if that means anything. What other shows are on Disney Plus right now? So there's that. Take that with a grain of salt. It is unfortunate that people spend their free time tearing something down for such terrible reasons, right? Especially when there's people out there that could possibly enjoy it, but just won't give it a chance because of how easily impressionable they are. And to be clear, I don't have a single issue with valid critiques, right? It doesn't even bother me if someone doesn't like these properties at all. It's just how these bad faith actors hold Ironheart and the character Riri to this strange standard that they don't have for the male MCU characters that have been in similar situations. Obviously, I'm not saying the exact situation. They're very similar situations. And it's unfortunate someone can give a genuine critique or review and it will automatically just get lumped into this sort of vacuum of hate. And it sucks. And that's all the more reason why genuine fans and critics should push back on this sort of behavior because it just it taints it for everyone, in my opinion. So, I mean, speaking of critiques, I went into the show, like I mentioned before, with low expectations. Ironheart, the show really kind of won me over. I didn't have an issue with the CGI like I saw with some people. I did think the pacing was a bit off. I did think it felt rushed. 6 episodes is weird, and I think it has a lot to do with the dropping 3 episodes and then a week later dropping another 3 episodes. That might be it. But honestly, I think that the MCU has struggled with these shows trying to create a series, but also trying to make it feel like a motion picture. And I don't think they've really nailed the format for that yet. Given that I don't really have a lot of complaints about the show, and I don't really get affected by negative reviews or hateful reviews because I'm honestly kind of numb to it. Anytime I see it, I just kind of like, whatever, those guys are weird. I think I have to give it a 4 out of 5, a 3.75 if we're going like, but it just depends. I'd probably watch it again. I'm gonna say 4 out of 5. Just why not? I do feel bad, as I mentioned before, that there are people that I think would genuinely enjoy this, but they were swayed by the hate. You shouldn't let anyone else tell you what to like, right? Watch it for yourself, or don't if you're not into it. But as a fan of comic books and comic book movies, I usually check these things out. And if you're an MCU fan, if you were in the past, if you still find yourself watching them, if you're interested in the future of the MCU's magical side with Mephisto's debut, I think you should watch it. If you're interested in the next generation of heroes or Riri's journey specifically, I think it's definitely worth your time. I could talk about this for hours. I wish Simon was here for me to bounce my ideas off of, and hopefully I'll get to talk to him about it soon. But I want to hear from you in the meantime. What did you think about Ironheart? What do you think about the sort of review bombing, hateful rhetoric culture that has just taken over since I feel like it's risen in popularity as much as the MCU has. So I'd like to know what you think about that. Hit us up, Wednesday Toast everywhere. Let us know what you're thinking. And I'm circling the drain, so I'll see you next week.